It took me 6 months to get a permit on this short-term rental, guys. Here's a story. Let's talk about some unexpected situations that I've experienced as an Airbnb host over the last 6 years. The first one is, how long does it actually take to get a short-term rental permit? Now, this is going to be different in every city. Now, I had a very particular experience in the city of Long Beach, California. They implemented a regulation last year in 2022. And as part of their permitting process, they send an inspector to your property to make sure that everything is up to code. Now, this property in particular is a sublease, so I do not own the property. I got permission in writing from the owner to use it as a short-term rental, and the city did require me to have a notarized document with that permission as well. Again, most cities do not require this, but the city of Long Beach did. Now, that was the easy part. That was not the difficult part at all. Here's where it got really challenging. Guys, it took 6 months to get a permit. Here's the reason why it took 6 months. And again, just because it took me 6 months, it doesn't mean it could take you 6 months. It could be a couple weeks for you if everything is up to code. The problem with this property is that it was not up to code, even though the owners had done over $200,000 in upgrades and renovations, right? The property, everything was basically brand new in amazing condition. But one of the first things that was not up to code is one of the bathrooms did not have a permit. And so they had to go through the permitting process. And that alone took like 6 weeks. They had to make a few changes. They had to get it permitted by the city. And then finally they said, all right, you got the green light. But then they continued to do the inspection. And then they said, hey, this little unit that you have over here, this ADU or this junior ADU, because it was attached to the property, they said that's not permitted. So they had to undo that junior ADU. Basically, they had closed down a wall, and what used to be a bedroom connected to the entire house, they closed off the hallway and made that bedroom like its own unit. And then once they got that fixed, then they said, hey, this thing over here in your garage, long story short, there was like 4 different things that needed to be brought up to code. The part that was upsetting to me is that they called each one of these things after one thing was fixed. Instead of saying, hey guys, these are the 4 things that you've got to fix in order for you to get a permit, they didn't. In total, it took about 6 months for us to finally get permits. Now, during those 6 months, I operated this unit as a mid-term rental, and we worked directly with a few different insurance companies that offered relocation services for their clients who had some type of water damage or whatever damage they had in their property, and it worked out. Out of the 6 months, there was 1 month where the property sat vacant, and the landlords were, a good team players, right? They were very understanding. I mean, it was not our fault, and in a way, it also wasn't their fault, right? Nobody knew that the property was going to have to be brought up to code with all these things they were nitpicking. So they actually covered the rent. The rent is $4,700 on this property. It's the most expensive property that I have in my portfolio. And yeah, they covered the rent on that 1 month that the property didn't rent. And on the other 5 months, the property still cash flowed. And it did quite well. So that was the first thing. You want to make sure that you figure out what is the permitting process, right? Again, very few cities, and I mean very few cities, will actually do a physical walkthrough of the property to make sure that it is up to code. If I ever acquire a property, whether it's a sublease or a purchase, and it needs to be up to code in order for me to get a permit, I'm going to do my due diligence and see what I can do to verify in advance before I acquire the property. If I notice that there's 12 minor things that, even though they're minor, but there's 12 things that are not up to code, I know it's going to take months. And if I know that I can run that property as a midterm rental in the meantime, then I'm going to move forward. But if for some reason I feel that there's not a lot of business for midterm rental in the area, like there's not a lot of hospitals, maybe not a lot of businesses, which the areas I focus on, there's always a ton of everything because I focus in strong primary markets near the downtowns, the convention centers, the theme parks, the beaches, where there's large populations, lots of businesses. So there's always going to be a midterm rental in the niche areas that I focus on. But it's just something for you to consider. Like if you're going to launch one in a vacation destination area, in a desert area, and that is one of the requirements, it may not be a very good property for midterm rentals, right? Especially in a desert area where there's hardly any people and a smaller population. So that's just something for you guys to look out for, because this could take longer. And by the way, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Here's a second unexpected situation I had as an Airbnb host. Back in 2019, I started subleasing a property in the city of Whittier, California. It's a very small city, and I was 6 months into my lease agreement. Okay, this is also a sublease. The city had no regulation at the time. 6 months into my lease agreement, they literally implemented a regulation saying the next day, no more short-term rentals. And that was it. I couldn't do short-term rentals anymore in that city. So this is why it's so important in 2023 and beyond to only launch Airbnbs in cities where you can get a permit. Because here's the thing. If you go into an area like I did, that's a great area where they're not issuing permits, there's no regulation, but there's nothing preventing you from uploading the property. Because a lot of cities that require a permit, you need a permit number in order to create a listing on Airbnb. Not everywhere, but in many places where they require a permit. So here, I was able to launch it, but they weren't issuing permits. The solution is only launch where you can get a permit, period. Because if they make any changes to the regulation, it's going to be minor. The only time they are drastic changes is when they go from no regulation to a new regulation and you have no idea what it is. I couldn't operate my short-term rental the day after they announced it. How did I pivot? Now, even though this sounds like a tragedy, and it was, because that property was making $3,000 a month in profit. A tragedy. It was a tragedy. But in entrepreneurship and in life, you've got the peaks and the valleys. The peaks and the valleys. And one of the things that I learned from 2009, becoming an entrepreneur, buying my first piece of real estate in 2012, up until basically 2022, it was like an up market. Like everyone made a ton of money. Well, most people made a ton of money. And it made you feel like Superman. And now that we are in a recession, there's a lot of people in various industries. I'm talking people that I personally know who own skateboard shops, restaurants, ice cream shops. I'm talking about all the industries. Man, people are like a lot of people are struggling today, but you're not going to hear this or see this in the news because it's not part of their agenda. By the time they tell us we're in the recession, the rug has already been pulled and everyone's like on the floor like, what just happened? And so what I'm trying to say is there was not a lot of valleys during those years of the up market. Right? Everything was good and gravy. It was like a long honeymoon phase. The problem with that is that you don't learn. When things are going up, you don't learn that much. You're making money, but you're not learning. What I've learned in entrepreneurship is in the valleys, when SHIT hits the fan and things get tough, that's when you really learn as an entrepreneur, because you learn how to pivot, you learn how to make adjustments, you become better, stronger, faster. So when they implemented that regulation, I thought to myself, okay, well, what can I do? And so I was renting that property. I had that property under contract for a 12-month lease, and I was paying $3,500 a month. The property was furnished, put like, I don't know, $13,000, $14,000 in furniture, appliances, decor supplies. The property is amazing, right? It's a 3-2 craftsman home with a pool, big backyard, a built-in barbecue in the backyard. Like, the property was amazing and in a really, really nice neighborhood. I started renting that property, I think it was around September, October of 2019. 6 months later, we're in the pandemic. And I started advertising the property as a long-term rental on Zillow for $4,000 a month. And there was a family who was living in downtown LA, which is only about maybe 17 miles away. And they were living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, a husband and wife, and I think like one baby or one child. And it was a really small apartment, and they felt like they were kind of crammed in, especially with social distancing. They wanted to have a house that they could live in. So I started renting the property to them for $4,000 a month. Remember, I'm paying $3,500 a month. They're paying me $4,000 a month, and they're the ones paying the utilities because it's a long-term rental. So I started making $500 a month in cash flow. Now here's the interesting part, guys. I still have that property today in my portfolio. Just about 3 years and a month or so, a little more than 3 years of me continuing, still to this day, I am making $500 off of a long-term tenant. And you could just imagine, right? There's no turnover, there's no cleaning. We speak to, my property management team speaks to the tenant probably like once every 6 months when they have a question or two. So I learned the importance of paying fair market rents. Because if there's ever a situation where I need to pivot away from short-term rentals, right, we should always have exit strategies as entrepreneurs, as real estate investors. Hey, if plan A doesn't work, what can I do? What can be plan B? What can be plan C? That's the solution. I know that if I ever went to a great area again, which I don't plan on, but if I ever did and that happened, boom, I just switched to a long-term rental. Worst case, I make $500 a month, or maybe zero, and I break even for the remainder of the lease. And at the end of the lease, I collect my deposit and walk away. Like, that's literally the worst case scenario. Now, I'm pretty good at running my numbers, and I typically operate Airbnbs in cities where I'm already operating Airbnbs, so it makes it easier. And so if I wasn't making money in an Airbnb, I could just pivot and do the same thing, right? Those are the two things that could happen, right? The worst things. A regulation gets implemented in an area where there previously was no regulation and it's not in your favor, or you weren't making money, you were losing a couple $100s a month. The solution is the same to both. You put a long-term tenant in the property for the remainder of the lease, and then boom, you walk away. If you're enjoying this video, guys, smash the like button because we're just getting started. I got some crazy stories for you guys, some unexpected situations. So hit that like button because making these videos is a lot of work. Appreciate that in advance. The next unexpected story is one of my properties. This is one of the properties that I own. And we've always put little signs in the bathrooms that say, please do not flush, female products or baby wipes or anything other than toilet paper. Do not flush in the toilet. Because obviously that's created plumbing issues. And so for some reason, this family didn't pay attention or just ignored the sign. They put all these things down the toilet that they really shouldn't have. The feces came out over the toilet, started overflowing. I'm getting the chills. And it went out through the bathrooms, through the hallway, into the living room area. Disgusting. I know. So first of all, the guests contact us and say, hey, we got a plumbing issue here. The toilet got backed up and yeah, it's really bad. Can we get somebody over here? And I'm like, well, you weren't supposed to be flushing all those things down the toilet, and then that wouldn't have happened. So we sent our plumber and our cleaning crew. We had the guest leave the property for like 5 hours. My cleaning crew cleaned everything, right? It took them a couple of hours. And then my plumbers came to the property and they had to snake it, and they pulled out baby wipes, female products, excessive toilet paper. Long story short, like, it got fixed, right? It just created a little bit of chaos temporarily. I had to pay my plumber like $200 to come snake the property. And I was gonna charge the guest. Maybe I should have charged the guest, but this was a pretty big booking. I think they booked like 6 nights for like $3,600. So my mortgage is only like $3,300. So those 5 of the 6 nights paid my mortgage and the rest was profit. I wanted to make sure I would get that 5-star review. I have ways to get both, submit a claim, get them to pay for it, but sometimes you gotta outweigh the pros and cons. And in this particular situation, they paid so much money that I'm like, you know what? I'll just cover it. I want to make sure the guests are happy and get them to come back because they paid top dollar. But that was that. So let's talk about the next unexpected situation. This actually happened at one of my students' property. Crazy story, guys. So one of my students has a sublease and he had a family that was staying at his property. Big booking, like $3,000 for 5 days. Paid 90% of his rent with those 5 days. And the family was out and about like at a dog show or something like that. And they had like this $30,000 dog. Apparently, it's kind of crazy. Somebody followed them back to the property to find where that dog was living. And At some point during their stay, I think it was in the nighttime or something like that, those people that followed them back to the property broke into the property and stole the dog. Roof, roof. They filed a police report, and then I don't know what happened after that. But this is a true story, so it's kind of weird, right? All right, the last story here for you guys. This is actually one of my very first hosting experience. I had a family, and the next day they said, hey, there's bed bugs in the property. And they literally sent me a picture through the Airbnb app showing how one of them got bit and there was like a little bit of blood in their arm. Like, we didn't have any bed bugs in the property prior to them coming to the property. So I am 100% confident that they brought their bed bugs in their luggage and into my Airbnb. As some of you may know, it could be very costly and it could take a long time to get rid of bed bugs. Sometimes you gotta throw out these mattresses. Now, luckily, I went on Amazon and I found this green bottle that's called the bed bugs, and it's a $50 bed bug spray, and it worked like magic. And we sprayed the heck out of those mattresses. Front, back, let it dry up. Within 24 hours, the bed bugs were gone forever. So, those are some of my unexpected Airbnb hosting situations. I would love to hear some of your stories. Please, I want to read these. I want to read your stories. Let me know your unexpected situations down below in the comments. I'm going to read each and every one, or one that you've heard. It could have been your story or one that you've heard. Let me know in the comments, please. I want to read them. This is going to be fun. Maybe I'll make a reaction video. I don't know. We'll see. And with that being said, guys, check out the links in the description down below. Make sure you guys follow me on Instagram, where I post every single day. Check out one of my other videos here, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.